She painted a stranger's face long before she ever met him. But when he finally walked into her gallery, she realized the man in her art was very real and dangerously connected to her past life. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you're ready to uncover the forbidden love that defied time itself. The night Dallas turned gold beneath the city lights, Ava Morgan stood in front of her own painting and felt like an imposter in her own world. The room hummed with chatter, soft jazz curling through the air of the uptown gallery. Her art hung on whitewashed walls, a storm of muted blues and burning reds, portraits that seemed to bleed emotion, scenes from eras she had never lived. People sipped champagne, murmuring words like haunting, tragic, beautifully unsettling. Ava smiled politely as a woman in pearls leaned closer to her favorite piece, a canvas depicting a man standing in the middle of a burning field, his uniform tattered, his hand reaching toward something unseen. His eyes, gray and aching, were fixed on the viewer. "That one," the woman said softly. "It's as if he's waiting for someone, or remembering something he's lost." Ava's lips parted, but no words came. The truth was too strange to explain. She didn't know who he was. She only knew she dreamed of him. For months, her nights were filled with the same face, sometimes shrouded in smoke, sometimes smiling faintly under a vast orange sky. She always woke with the echo of his voice in her ears, whispering her name like a prayer she had forgotten. Ava. She hadn't told anyone about the dreams. They were too vivid, too personal. Sometimes she woke crying, reaching for someone who wasn't there. Tonight, surrounded by admirers and critics, she felt detached, like a ghost wandering through her own success. Her best friend and agent, Naomi, leaned close and whispered, "You should be proud. This is the biggest turnout yet." Even the Dallas Morning Herald sent someone. "And that man by the window? He's been staring at your painting for 10 minutes straight." Ava followed her gaze. He stood slightly apart from the crowd, tall, dressed in a dark gray suit, the kind that fit too perfectly to be casual. His hair was black with a few early streaks of silver near his temples, his features sharp and intelligent, his posture calm but alert. He wasn't looking around or networking. His eyes were fixed entirely on the painting. The painting of him. Ava's breath caught. It couldn't be. He was the man she had dreamed of. Every brushstroke she had made, every haunting shade of gray she had mixed, his face, his eyes, his expression, it was all him. The champagne glass in her hand trembled. Naomi was still talking, but Ava couldn't hear her. She moved toward him before she could talk herself out of it. "Beautiful work," he said when she approached, his voice calm, low, steady, the kind of voice that lingered in the air. "But I have to ask, where did you get the inspiration for this one?" He gestured to the painting, the man in the smoke. Ava swallowed hard. I don't really know. It just came to me." He studied her quietly, like he was measuring her words against something he already knew. Then his gaze softened. "I'm sorry. That probably sounded like a weird question. I'm Eric Hayes. I teach history at SMU, mostly 19th century Texas. I study old love stories, folklore, unsolved mysteries. This painting just..." He hesitated, his throat tightening. "It looks like someone I once read about." "Someone real?" Ava asked. He smiled faintly. "That's the thing. I'm not sure." For a moment, the sounds of the gallery faded. The music, the chatter, the clinking glasses, everything receded until there was only the two of them, and the air between them thrummed with something neither could name. When she extended her hand, it was meant to be polite, a formality. But the instant his skin touched hers, a spark shot through her like an electric pulse. In that single moment, the gallery dissolved. She wasn't in Dallas anymore. She was standing in a burning field. The sky above her glowed orange and black, the air thick with ash. A man, the same man, reached for her, his uniform scorched, his face streaked with soot and blood. "Ellie," he gasped. "Don't let go." Her heart twisted, the smell of smoke choking her lungs. Then as suddenly as it came, the vision was gone. She stumbled back, her breath sharp and shallow. Eric caught her arm quickly, his grip firm, his expression as startled as hers. "Ava," he said softly. "Are you all right?" She nodded, though her head spun. I'm fine. Just dizzy." He looked at her for a long moment, his brow furrowing. "I'm sorry if I startled you." "No, you didn't," she lied, though her pulse raced wildly. "I just felt something strange. Déjà vu, maybe." He hesitated, then smiled, but it was a weary smile, as if he understood exactly what she meant. "Déjà vu," he repeated. "Yeah, that's a word for it." Later that night, after the gallery emptied and Naomi left with a car full of sold pieces, Ava stayed behind to clean her brushes and pack up her things. The painting of the man, his painting, was still there. She had sold every other piece, but this one she couldn't part with. Not yet. She stood before it now, the streetlights casting soft golden streaks through the gallery windows. The man in the portrait seemed almost alive in that glow, his gray eyes reflecting the same sorrow she felt in her chest. She whispered to him, "Who are you?" The silence answered her, heavy and still. Across town, Eric Hayes sat alone in his apartment, staring at the same painting. A photo of it he had snapped at the gallery. His laptop screen glowed with an open document titled, The Eleanor Brooks Mystery. He leaned back, running a hand through his hair. For years, he had been obsessed with a half-forgotten story from the late 1800s. The tragedy of Eleanor Brooks, the daughter of a wealthy rancher near the Trinity River, and Captain William Hayes, a Union officer who vanished after a fire destroyed the Brooks estate. The only surviving account described them as star-crossed lovers doomed by war and blood. Eric had found old letters. One signed Eleanor, another signed William, but nothing that proved what happened to them. Until tonight. Because the face in Ava's painting wasn't just familiar. It was identical to William Hayes, his ancestor. The next morning, Ava woke before sunrise. She had dreamed again. In the dream she was standing on a riverbank. The water was calm, reflecting the pale dawn sky. The man was there again, no fire this time, just peace. He smiled at her, touched her cheek and said, "We missed our chance once. Don't let it happen again." She woke with tears on her face. Her phone buzzed. It was Naomi. Guess who called asking for a private commission? Naomi's voice was bright. "That historian from last night, Eric Hayes. He said he wants to learn more about your work and the stories behind it." He sounded fascinated. Ava sat up slowly, her heart pounding. "Did he say what he wanted me to paint?" "Nope. Just that he'd like to talk in person. He said it's something important." Ava hesitated. "Okay. Set it up." When she hung up, she looked around her loft. Her canvases leaned against the walls, unfinished, but every one of them carried traces of that same world she couldn't escape. Fields, rivers, an old mansion in flames. And always that man. She pulled on her robe and walked to her easel. A fresh canvas waited, blank and white, calling to her. Without thinking, she dipped her brush into crimson paint and began to stroke wide arcs across the surface. When she stepped back, her chest tightened. The scene forming under her hand was the same river from her dream, and in the center, two figures stood facing each other under the dawn. She didn't remember deciding to paint them, but her hand had moved on its own. The woman's face was hers. The man's was his. By noon, she sat across from Eric at a small cafe in downtown Dallas. The air outside shimmered with heat. Inside, the light through the windows painted them both in soft amber. "I looked up your work," he said, sipping his coffee. "You paint a lot of recurring imagery, rivers, fires, soldiers. Any reason for that?" Ava hesitated. "They just come to me. Like fragments of something I can't quite remember." He nodded slowly. "That makes sense. You said last night you don't know where your inspiration comes from? But what if you've seen these things before? Not in pictures, in another time." She frowned. "You mean like past life stuff?" Eric met her gaze, unblinking. "Maybe. Because I think I've seen you before. Or someone who looked exactly like you." Her heartbeat quickened. "In one of your archives?" "In a photograph," he said quietly, reaching into his briefcase. He unfolded an old, sepia-toned image, cracked with age but clear enough to see the faces. A woman in a white gown stood beside a man in uniform. The resemblance was undeniable. Ava stared at it, her throat tight. That's impossible." "The man," Eric said, "was William Hayes. He was my great-great-grandfather." Her eyes flicked to his. "And the woman?" "Eleanor Brooks. His lover. She died in a fire in 1883. The cafe seemed to tilt. She gripped the edge of the table, her voice trembling. "Eric, last night when we shook hands I saw fire. I smelled smoke. And someone, he called me Ellie." He drew in a slow breath, his voice barely above a whisper. "Then maybe it's not impossible at all." That night, as Ava drove home through the glowing streets of Dallas, she couldn't stop thinking about his eyes, not Eric's but William's, staring out of the old photograph. They were the same. The same sorrow. The same tenderness. By the time she reached her loft, the air felt heavy, charged with something ancient and restless. She dropped her keys on the table, turned on the lights, and froze. The painting on her easel had changed. She hadn't touched it since morning, but now the river behind the couple was gone. In its place was a field of flames. And at the bottom corner, written in faint red paint that she swore she hadn't added, were 3 words. We meet again. The rain began just as Ava pulled into the parking lot of the Dallas Historical Archives. It fell in quiet sheets, soft enough to blur the glass walls of the building, making the world outside shimmer like a half-forgotten dream. Eric was waiting for her inside. He stood near the entrance, his dark suit damp from the drizzle, his expression serious but lit by a quiet warmth when he saw her. You came, he said softly, as if he hadn't quite believed she would. Ava managed a small smile. After what I saw on that painting, I couldn't stay away. They didn't speak again until they were seated in one of the research rooms, rows of long wooden tables, the air filled with the faint scent of paper and time. Eric spread a few folders in front of her, his movements deliberate, almost reverent. These, he said, opening the first folder, are copies of letters found near the old Brooks Ranch outside Dallas. They're from 1883, right before the fire. The first page was yellowed and fragile, written in graceful cursive ink. My dearest William, I fear the world will never forgive what we have done, nor will it allow what we dream. But even if this love is a sin, it is the only truth I have ever known. Ava's throat tightened as she read, her fingers brushing the edge of the paper like it was something holy. She wrote this, she whispered. Eleanor Brooks? Eric nodded. She was the daughter of Jeremiah Brooks, one of the richest ranch owners in Texas back then. William Hayes was a Union officer sent to mediate trade disputes after the war. They met, fell in love, and were discovered. Her father ordered him gone. The night he tried to take her away, the house caught fire. They both died. Ava's eyes lifted slowly to his. You said they both died? That's what the records say. But the bodies were never identified. Just found together, holding hands. His voice softened. Every historian assumes they perished together. Ava looked back down at the letter. Something about the slant of the handwriting felt disturbingly familiar, as if she'd written it herself in another hand, another century. Her vision blurred for a moment and she blinked. The ink seemed to shift. The words rearranged. Suddenly, she could hear the sound of a quill scratching across parchment. The soft hiss of candlelight. And her own voice whispering the same words aloud. Even if this love is a sin, it is the only truth I have ever known. She gasped quietly, gripping the table. Eric looked up, alarmed. Ava? She shook her head quickly. It's fine. I just remembered something. For a second it was like I was there. He hesitated, then said, Would you believe me if I said I've been feeling the same thing? Her gaze met his. His expression was steady, sincere, but there was something vulnerable behind it. Something lost. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. After you left last night, I kept thinking about that photograph, about her face. I looked through my family's old journals. There's a passage from 1922 where my great-grandfather wrote, The woman who visits our dreams always comes with fire in her eyes. He said every firstborn son in our line dreams of her. Of Eleanor? Eric's eyes darkened slightly. That's what I used to think. But now I'm not sure. Pause. Then, quietly, maybe it was you. Ava's breath caught. The air between them felt charged again, like when their hands had first touched at the gallery. The same invisible thread pulled them closer. He reached for the next folder, and this time the photograph inside wasn't of people, it was of the house. Or what remained of it. Charred wood, collapsed beams, and in the corner of the frame, something faintly visible, the outline of 2 figures standing near the ruins. Ava's pulse quickened. That's impossible. This photo was taken after the fire? Yes. A week after, by one of the investigators. She leaned closer. The faces were faint, blurred, but they were there. A woman in a white dress. A man beside her. Both looking directly at the camera. Her fingers trembled. Eric, do you see that? He nodded slowly. Every historian I've shown it to says it's just a trick of the smoke. But look at it. Tell me that doesn't look like us. It did. Exactly like them. A tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. Why would we come back? Why us? I don't know. His voice was almost a whisper. Maybe because something unfinished always finds its way back. Later they stood beneath an umbrella outside the building, the rain still falling in thin silver lines. The city felt quiet, as if it too was listening. Come with me tomorrow, Eric said suddenly. To the ruins of the Brooks Ranch. It's a 2-hour drive north. The land's abandoned now, but something tells me you should see it. She hesitated, then nodded. Okay. When he smiled, it wasn't the polished smile of a professor. It was something deeper, gentler, the kind of expression that said he'd been waiting for this answer for a long time. The next afternoon, the world stretched into rolling Texas plains and golden grass. The drive was long and they spoke softly, their voices mixing with the hum of the highway. They talked about ordinary things, art, music, childhood memories, but beneath every word lingered the question neither dared to say aloud. What if this isn't the first time we've done this? By the time they reached the property, the sun had begun to lower, bathing the hills in amber light. The ruins were barely visible through the overgrowth, a few stone walls, a crumbling chimney, and the faint outline of a once grand house. Ava stepped out of the car and froze. The wind carried the faint scent of smoke. Not the sharp sting of something burning, but an echo, like a memory of fire that never faded. Eric watched her quietly as she walked ahead, her boots crunching over brittle grass. She stopped before what used to be a grand front step, her fingers tracing the old brick. "It's strange," she whispered. "It feels like I've been here before." "Maybe you have," he said gently. She turned to him, her eyes glistening. "When I close my eyes, I see this place alive. I hear music, laughter, lanterns. And him, standing over there waiting for me." She pointed toward the far side of the ruins. Eric followed her gaze and froze. For a fraction of a second he saw it too. The faint outline of a man standing by the old oak tree. Then it was gone. They stood in silence, the air between them thick with something old and familiar. Finally, Ava stepped closer to him. "Eric, what if we're not supposed to find each other again?" He met her gaze, his eyes soft but certain. "Then why does it feel like we already did?" For a heartbeat, she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he reached for her hand. The moment their fingers intertwined, warmth flooded through her chest, a steady, aching pulse of recognition. The setting sun caught the side of his face, lighting the silver in his hair, and for an instant she could see him as he had been, William, in a dark blue uniform, smiling at her across a ballroom. Her vision blurred again, but this time she didn't fight it. She saw herself, Eleanor, standing in a white lace gown, heart pounding, watching as William Hayes crossed the room toward her. The music faded. The crowd disappeared. Only him. "If they find us," she whispered in the memory, "we'll both be ruined." "Then let's be ruined together," he said, smiling. Her breath caught as she came back to the present, tears streaking her face. Eric held her, his voice barely a whisper. "What did you see?" "Us," she said. "Then and now. Like a memory that never died." That night, Ava couldn't sleep. She sat by her easel again, painting under the glow of her studio lights. Each stroke felt guided by something outside herself. A memory or maybe a hand that remembered even when she didn't. When the painting was done, she stepped back. It was the mansion, the Brooks house, before the fire. The ballroom full of people. And at the center a couple dancing. Herself. And Eric. She heard a faint knock on her door. Her heart jumped. It was Eric. He stood there in the doorway, rain clinging to his hair, his expression soft and unguarded. "I couldn't sleep," he admitted. "I kept seeing the same dream. The fire. I thought if I didn't see you right now, I'd lose the memory completely." Without thinking, she let him in. They stood by the window, the Dallas skyline glittering behind them. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Ava said quietly, "What if this is our chance to end the story the right way?" Eric looked at her, eyes glinting with something between sorrow and hope. "And what if we can't change it?" "Then at least," she said, stepping closer, "we finally get to finish it." The rain tapped softly on the glass as they leaned into each other. It wasn't a desperate kiss, nor a first one. It felt like a continuation of something ancient, something paused long ago and now resumed. When they finally pulled apart, tears shimmered in her eyes. "It feels like I've waited lifetimes for this." He smiled faintly, his forehead resting against hers. "You have." The next morning when Ava woke, the painting was different again. The ballroom had turned to flame, and in the corner, barely visible through the smoke, were two silhouettes holding each other as the fire closed in. And beneath it, written in the same faint red paint, new words appeared. "We remember." The first time Ava saw the storm brewing over Dallas, she thought it was just another rain. But as she watched the clouds coil like smoke over the skyline, she felt it in her bones. Something old, persistent, and restless was waking again. Eric arrived at her loft just as the first fat drops began to fall. His coat was dark, damp from the weather, but his eyes were fixed entirely on her. "You came," she whispered. "Even with the storm?" He smiled faintly, but there was tension there, like a shadow he couldn't shake. I couldn't wait. We need to talk about last night. About us. Ava felt a tightening in her chest, the same ache she had felt when she first touched his hand at the gallery. Us? She echoed, almost afraid of the answer. He hesitated, then took her hands in his. Ava. I've been reading everything I can about Eleanor and William. Every letter, every diary entry, every story I could find. And I think we're repeating it. Only this time, maybe we can do it differently. Ava's heart skipped. Do you really believe that? Eric nodded, his gaze unwavering. I do. But I also think we're not free. Not completely. Their story didn't end because they didn't want it to. It ended because fate refused to let them live it fully. And I'm afraid the same is happening to us. Ava swallowed hard. You mean, the fire? He shook his head. Not literally. But there's something heavy. Something that keeps pushing us toward the same ending. I felt it the first time I touched your hand. Like a warning, or a reminder. The room fell silent, the storm outside echoing the tension inside. That night, unable to sleep, Ava found herself sketching again. Her hand moved as if guided by a memory, painting scenes from the past she didn't consciously remember. The fire. The ballroom. The river. And always the two of them, Eleanor and William, intertwined, holding each other close. A soft knock on her door startled her. It was Eric. His hair was wet, his coat dripping onto the rug. I couldn't stay away, he said quietly. I needed to see you. Without thinking, she opened the door. He stepped in, the storm still clinging to him. They didn't speak at first, simply standing together in the dim light of the loft. Finally, he broke the silence. I spoke to someone today. Someone unusual. An old woman in deep Elm. She claimed she could read echoes of the past in the present. She said something about us. Ava frowned. Us? What did she say? Eric swallowed. She said that some loves are cursed. That if they try to find each other again, tragedy follows. That we were never meant to meet in this lifetime, not like this. But she also said, some souls are too strong to forget each other. That we'd keep finding one another no matter what. Ava's fingers trembled. So we're doomed? Maybe, he admitted. But we have a choice. We can try to fight it, or we can embrace it. And either way, we don't pretend we don't feel what's happening between us. She stepped closer, her chest tight with longing and fear. I can't stop feeling it, Eric. I can't. He took her face gently in his hands. Nor can I. Every time I look at you, it's like I'm remembering a life I didn't live, a love I lost too soon. And now I have you again. I can't. I won't let it slip away. Her tears fell freely. She leaned into him, feeling the same ache and tenderness she had in her dreams, in her paintings, in the echoes of the past. For a moment, the storm outside faded, and there was only them, two souls remembering what they had been before. The following days were a blur of longing and history. Eric introduced Ava to more letters and journals, each one unraveling the lives of Eleanor and William. I dream of you every night, Eleanor wrote in one entry. I wake with your face on my lips. If only the world would allow us to exist, we could be happy. Ava's hands shook as she read. It's like they were living the same love we are now. Eric nodded. And it ended tragically. But I refuse to believe it has to end that way again. Yet, as the storm clouds over Dallas mirrored the turmoil in their hearts, strange things began to happen. Ava would find her paintings altered overnight, showing scenes she hadn't painted, shadows of fire creeping across the canvas, faint words appearing at the corners. Do not forget, we are still here. Eric, too, experienced odd symptoms. Sudden fatigue, strange dreams, flashes of the past where he could see himself as William. The same chest pain William had suffered before the fire, the same desperate need to protect Eleanor. One evening, he confided in her quietly. I think it's happening again. The way it happened before. The way it ended. I feel it, like a storm gathering inside me. Ava held him close, her tears soaking his coat. Then we fight it, she whispered. We fight it together. They spent the nights walking along the Trinity River, trying to relive the past through the present, tracing the paths Eleanor and William might have walked, speaking the words they had never had a chance to say aloud. And in those moments, nothing else existed but their love, fierce, fragile, and burning with the heat of centuries. But fate has a way of reminding lovers of its power. One evening, as they stood on the riverbank watching the sunset, a sudden flash of memory struck Ava with unbearable force. She saw herself in a white lace gown, her hands clutching William's, the fire closing in around them. She gasped, the vision so vivid it left her trembling. Eric caught her hands, concern etched on his face. What is it? She shook her head. It's the fire. It's happening again. I can see it, the moment they died. The same as in the past. He swallowed hard, his grip tightening. I felt it too. The same flash, like my body remembers what it did before. Ava's voice was barely a whisper. Do you think this is why we met? To finish it? Or to fail again? Eric's jaw tightened, his eyes dark with emotion. I don't know. But I do know this. I won't let it end without trying. Not again. Not with you. She felt the warmth of his hands, the certainty in his words, and for the first time in days, a fragile hope bloomed in her chest. That night, Ava painted feverishly, capturing every detail of the riverbank, the ruins, the mansion, and the two lovers standing against the fire. Eric sat beside her, silent, occasionally offering gentle guidance, his presence a steady anchor. By morning the painting was complete. It depicted the past and the present merged, Eleanor and William holding each other as flames licked the edges of the canvas, yet their faces serene, almost hopeful. Ava stepped back exhausted and whispered, "It's them. It's us." Eric's voice was low, reverent. And maybe it's a warning, but also a promise, that some loves, even cursed ones, find a way. They sat together in silence, watching the first rays of Dallas sunlight filter through the blinds. Neither spoke of the warning the old woman had given in deep elm, nor of the ache creeping through Eric's chest, nor of the faint smoke that seemed to drift through Ava's studio in the early hours. For now, there was only the knowledge that their souls had found each other again. That, no matter what history tried to dictate, their hearts were no longer bound by time, or at least not completely. And yet, both of them knew deep down, love this powerful, this fated, always comes at a price. The chapter closes with them standing together on the balcony of Ava's loft that evening, looking out over Dallas as the city lights shimmered through the rain. Ava rested her head against Eric's shoulder. Do you think we can survive this? He kissed her temple, his lips warm against her hair. If we have to die 1,000 times to love like this, I'll do it. I'd do it for you every time. The wind carried the faint scent of smoke, and somewhere in the distance, the echoes of a past life whispered through the night. The sky over Dallas was the color of bruised gold as Ava drove along the Trinity River, her hands gripping the wheel so tightly her knuckles whitened. Eric had been sick for days now. What started as mild fatigue had worsened, strange pains flaring in his chest, the same subtle ache that William had felt over a century ago. Ava had watched him try to hide it, smile through it, fight it, but she knew he couldn't. Not this time. She parked by the riverbank where the water mirrored the streaked clouds above. The air smelled of rain-soaked earth, of smoke long gone but remembered. She stepped out, her coat barely shielding her from the chill, and saw him sitting on a fallen log, staring at the river like he could see into another lifetime. "Eric," she whispered, approaching him carefully. He looked up and smiled, faint but tender. "Hey," he said softly. His voice carried a fragility that made her chest ache. She knelt beside him, taking his hand. It was warm, but his fingers were trembling. "You need to rest. Let me take you home." He shook his head. "No, I need to be here. With you. One last time, maybe, to remember what it feels like." Ava felt a lump in her throat. She knelt closer, resting her forehead against his. The wind rippled through their hair, and for a moment, the world disappeared. There was no Dallas, no rain, no past, only the pull of two souls that had been separated by fire, by time, by fate itself. "I don't want to lose you again," she whispered. "You won't," he said, though his eyes betrayed him. "I promise, if there's another lifetime, I'll find you." The memory hit them both suddenly, like the rush of wind before a storm. Ava saw herself as Eleanor, white dress, hair pinned back, hands shaking as William held her close in the ballroom of the Brooks house. The fire had begun somewhere beyond their vision, but its heat pressed against her skin. Eric felt it too, William's desperation, the inevitability of the fire, the ache of wanting to save someone he could not. They gasped in unison, and their hands found each other automatically. "We've done this before," Ava whispered, tears brimming. "And it always ended like this." "Not this time," Eric said, his voice trembling but certain. "Not if I have a say in it." Ava felt her heart swell. "But what if fate, what if it doesn't allow us?" Eric drew her closer. "Then we create our own fate. Together." Hours passed in silence as they sat by the river, watching the twilight deepen. Ava finally spoke, her voice low and fragile. "I painted one last time, last night. The fire, the ballroom, the river, us. Eric followed her gaze to the easel, where the painting glowed faintly in the dim light. Two figures holding each other against flames that licked the edges of the canvas, yet their faces were serene. Ava had captured both their past and present selves, Eleanor and William, Ava and Eric, merging them into one eternal moment. "It's beautiful," Eric whispered. His hand brushed the edge of the canvas as if touching it could bridge the centuries. Ava nodded. "It's our story. All of it. Even the pain." He held her close, whispering, "Then we don't have to be afraid anymore. Even if this is the last time." The night deepened and the storm finally broke over the river. Rain fell in heavy sheets, drumming against the water and the earth alike. They stood together, hand in hand, letting the storm wash over them. Ava's eyes locked with his, tears mingling with the rain. "Promise me, if it ends, if you have to leave me, that you'll find me again." Eric cupped her face gently. "I always do," he said. His lips brushed hers in a kiss that was both a farewell and a vow, a connection beyond time. And then, as the storm raged around them, he slumped into her arms. Ava gasped, her tears mixing with the rain. "Eric, stay with me, please." He smiled faintly, his eyes heavy with the weight of lifetimes. "If there's another life, I'll wait by this river, for you," he whispered. And then his body went limp. Ava's heart broke as the realization sank in. She held him against her chest, the river stretching endlessly before them, reflecting a sky that seemed to mourn with her. Days passed, though Ava lost all sense of them. She refused to leave the riverbank where Eric had fallen. She painted feverishly, capturing every detail of their love, every memory, every fire, every river, every stolen moment. Weeks later their painting, was finished. It was breathtaking, heartbreaking, eternal. She titled it, "Eleanor and William, Love Beyond Time." It hung in the Dallas Museum of Art, drawing visitors who couldn't explain why their hearts ached when they looked at it. Some felt inexplicable longing, others felt déjà vu. Among them was a young couple holding hands. Their eyes met the painting and for a moment they froze. The figures on the canvas seemed to look back at them, two souls reunited, two lives intertwined. And somewhere, perhaps in another lifetime, Ava and Eric waited for each other, across centuries, across rivers and flames, across the limits of time. Years later, Ava would tell herself she hadn't loved anyone like him again. But in the quietest moments, when the wind whispered through the trees and the river shimmered with dawn, she could feel him, William, Eric, timeless, pulling her back, calling her name softly, unmistakably, eternally. "Ava, Ellie, I found you again." She would smile knowing it was true. That love like theirs doesn't die. It only waits, until the next lifetime.